Hello, fellow viewers. AGOVC leader Dr. Ayaba addresses ground zero forces and the people of Ambazonia.
Uh, Good
Listen
morning, good
attentively.
afternoon to all
Thank you.
Ambazonian generals. This is Dr. Cho Ayaba. I am making this special address to all Ambazonian generals, commanders, and those in charge of units, barracks, military districts, coalition forces. And my hope after you listen to this audio is that we all come on the same page in terms of how we want to move things forward as a fighting bloc. I have spent the past 35 years trying desperately to pull our political leaders, stakeholders together. Past 35 years. It hasn't really worked out. The most important reason why this has not worked out is the structure of the occupation and its strategy. Each time there is an attempt to build cohesion, the enemy constructs divisive narratives. It examines the bloc and finds vulnerable entry points and cracks the cohesion and seeps in, undermines it from inside, recruit others to its side, recruit some and leave them inside to continuously propagate narratives that have virtually no chance of succeeding. This has been the pattern for a very long time. And this pattern has even been worse in the past 7 years. And so, on the other hand, we have also worked on the ground. We created the SCYL 1995. And we used the SCYL as a defense force. We realized that it was easier to build Ambazonians or to transform Ambazonians into militants than into political figures. We built units in Victoria, Mutengene, Ekona, Boya. I was the lead in Victoria. We mapped out all of the enemy's defenses. I moved into Manawa Bay in a military truck as a farmer to examine Manawa Bay. I have a very good sense of how it is. Mutengene was the same. The current defense chair of the ADF had Mutengene under his control. Dr. Akwanga, My 16, and Boya Bunduman, all of those places. Had others in Kumba. Strongest places, Bui, Alabukam, going to the Njutmankon area. Bomi, where late Pa Tete lives. We built forces there, far back as late 1996. The person you know down there as Pa Cat 1, one of the first persons that we got in Bui, far back 1996. This cohesion threatened political figures. Rather than see the structures we were putting in place as reinforcing structures, they saw them as competing structures. And in their attempt at always being in charge by virtue of age, by virtue of being elites, they infiltrated some of these structures. They attacked some from inside. They used tribalism in areas like Bui. They recruited some to be their youth wings and others. And what happened? They all vanished. Bound for in jail. We went around. We did not only set up the youth league and stayed quiet. We saw within the SCNC militant individuals, late Dr. Yombang, late Ambassador Epie. You have Pat Tete was a rep of the SCNC in the Bomi area. Pa Lamfu, you have other militant individuals within the ranks of the SCNC. We even went into the SDF. 1996, our first meeting with Pamfo, when he was Constitutional Affairs Chairman of the SDF, because we listened to him. His positions were militant, and we spoke to him to join us and abandon the SDF. Doki Mokete, the same. So we did everything to bring revolutionaries together, so we could face the enemy in the way that we believe will bring us meaningful victory. But the political class, they perceive elites, and those who think they were entitled always try to undermine those efforts. And that has been the trajectory in the last 7 years. Once we got thousands of men to be trained in Dadi, we didn't just take these men and saw them as, our fighters, or as people refer to you people as our boys. We saw the forces we create as soldiers of an Ambazonian state, with a chain of command. That's how we set up these forces. But they became, instead of being seen as reinforcing, elites, individuals more interested in power, saw them as competing. They did the same again. They went in, infiltrated, recruited, and did not have the ability to exercise command and control or provide a political vision or an ideology that the forces could independently work on. And what has made me to make this audio today is because I was just looking through social media and I saw a video of Koraman. I saw a picture of Commando. And I went beyond to think about how some of these men have fallen, both from within the ADF and not exempted, and other forces. 90% of these generals will still be alive today. RK will be alive today. Niba of 7 Kata whom I put in Bafut will still be alive today. Because the struggle for our freedom is not simply divorced from the personal relationships that we build. So if a soldier has a headache, it becomes a responsibility of everybody to make sure that they are taken care of. So when you ask yourself, why did these men suddenly fall? Field Marshal of Lebialem, the large force. Lebialem is not a place that the enemy should be able to go through. It's a rugged place where if you are not from there, you don't know it, you can't fight there. What happened? I don't want us to rehash this past, but it's a rhetorical question. What happened? You can blame what you describe as diaspora, you can blame this, you can blame that, but I want you to begin to look inside. What is your role in what has happened? And are you still playing the same role? Is money a driving force in what has happened? Is the pursuit of power rather than freedom a driving force? What is the motivation? I have looked at it. There is something they call the war economy. And this is very important for you, the generals. The war economy is when, in areas of resistance, soldiers create a source of mobilizing money to fund the resistance. And in a long run, it begins to have a negative impact on the resistance, because making the money then begins to take priority over the pursuit of freedom. The struggle for control of areas, not for the defense of those areas, not for the freedom of those areas, but for the resources that can come within those areas, becomes a priority to forces. Struggles have been prolonged because of war economies. Diamond mines, gold mines, oil wells. Commanders, political individuals begin to make huge amount of monies from the natural resources that it means nothing to them if the war takes 30, 50 years. At certain political level, especially the Ambazonian, it's simple relevance. Ambazonian have been dehumanized for so long that the resistance has provided to some a platform just to be relevant, just to be important, to have Facebook views, social media views. That's how dehumanized we have become, to retard the struggle on the basis of relevance. So the war economy has an impact on whether the struggle goes ahead or it goes behind. So far in the Ambazonian struggle, it has had an impact of keeping the struggle in kind of a cyclical manner, where you're just going around a circle. And it's not only because of the war economy, it's also because of a reality that is not of our making. In most liberation struggles, you have the officers, well trained in tactics, operational tactics, on how to measure progress, how to make changes when there are setbacks. And in those countries with good neighbors, external support, the Mandelas flew to Libya, they sent fighters to Cuba, they were trained. Officers are the most important individuals, whether in standing armies or liberation struggles. These are people with the tactical ability and the political know-how to lead. Sometimes you may have officers who are not trained externally, but they come from the root of political revolutions. They have immersed themselves in political ideologies. They've read a lot about other struggles. They are well informed. They have an ideological foundation which is the basis of their rebellion. And they can lead without being able to provide the tactical know-how that would enable you, if you want to attack the base of the enemy, you know exactly the steps you're supposed to take. So it's a limitation in our own struggle. But longevity also sometimes eliminate or mitigate the effect of that limitation. But if we have our finest generals falling, we take away the experience required to operate and to train new officers. The question I want all of you to answer in your minds, look into a mirror when you answer this question. What is the budget of your barrack? How much money does your barrack have? What is the manpower of your barrack? What are the capabilities of your barrack? Are you recruiting more or are you losing more? These are rhetorical questions, and I like all of you to answer them quietly. You recruit new people to energize, orders. You set up new offices. You set up specific offices where people can work on specific projects, make themselves relevant, be able to measure the impact of their input, and to see the result in terms of tangible outputs. And in terms of communication, you should determine the impact, your communication has on the people, on the enemy's narrative. You measure the attitude of the enemy in many ways to determine if you are on good standing. So sometimes when I come out, I talk about our struggle is going fine. It doesn't mean there are no areas of weaknesses. It means on the general basis and the summation of all the key indicators, we are on good standing. Now, it is very important that all the generals and commanders listen to this last part of my message. I have worked out a plan. The plan does not alter what you do. It keeps you in charge, but it adds something. It keeps you networked. It keeps you also hopeful. You still mobilize your resources. You still design your strategies. You execute them to keep the resistance going. Where I come in is to answer the big question. The big question covers the areas where your power ends. How do we achieve liberation? How do we translate resistance into freedom? In answering this big question, I combine a lot of strategies: diplomatic, communication, defense, civil society mobilization, and resource mobilization. If you look at our civil society, they feel weakened because they don't know how they are going to move from this state of perceived diminishing returns to complete freedom. So I use my communication to educate and inform. And they will say, well, it sounds good, but we are hopeful. To turn their hope into reality, I take tangible steps in ensuring that we mobilize resources for sustainable resistance. It is only sustainable resistance that undermines the economic and political ability of the enemy to exercise control that will translate resistance into liberation. We are not dealing with Frederick de Klerk, or what do you call this guy, Suharto in Indonesia, who got up one day and said, well, I think we can give autonomy to East Timor, but if they vote for independence, that's fine. Or is it de Klerk or Peter Botha? I'm not quite sure, but I think it's de Klerk who says, well, I think it's time to send my brother to go talk to Thabo Mbeki. We are dealing with Mr. Biya. He will not even talk to teachers. He will not talk to lawyers. He will rather muscle them on the street, kidnap them from Biafra land or Nigeria, ship them back into jail and lock them in inhumane and degrading condition. We are dealing with a guy who possibly the wife giving him wisdom advice, and he flies abroad and asks his guards to murder the wife. That's the kind of guy we're dealing with. So you can engage in your resistance and hope one day that if you had a Soweto or de Klerk who feel like, okay, I can't defeat these people, they can't defeat me, but I don't think holding them in captivity is the way forward. You're dealing with a guy that you will need to defeat the guy. We will need to completely defeat La Republique. And that means we are going to go the Eritrean way. Right? And for that, we need resources. And the plan I've put in place is one that builds a broad-based coalition of revolutionaries tapped from the Nationalist Foundation who believe in the armed resistance to our freedom. This is the coalition that I'm trying to build. Not struggling every time to compensate people for purposes of political relevance. And once we've established this coalition and defeat the enemy, but before then, all of us will have an idea what comes after and what I have proposed from state to state in terms of what I'm trying to do in Bui, what I'm doing in Mezam, doing in Boyo, is that we will have state central commands that will bring all the forces, the top generals into the central command of the state. They are then going to constitute the lower ranks into whether brigades, units, and stuff. But the central command becomes the authority of that state. And that central command will be made up of all the forces. It will just be central command. If in that state you have the ADF, you have the ARF, you have the 7 Qatar, and then it will be a central command of all these forces combined. Once there is an Ambazonian government, it is translated into the central command of the Ambazonian army, answerable to the Ambazonian government. And I think if we are able to take 2 states together, we will set up the central command. We will decide and set up what I call the transitional authority that begins to bat for all of us, where you have the leader of the transitional authority is in exile, and then the deputy is within the territory in the areas we control. And as we use those control areas for training, build up capacity, we'll wipe these drunkards out in the shortest time possible. And we will still leave the central command intact until the transitional authority defines the parameters of and the structure of the Ambazonian army. And then we move to the next level of constituting the Ambazonian army. This is a plan that is a win-win plan for all of us. But first, we have to increase the budget. If you are staying in a barrack, you don't have 10 million as a barrack budget, that's absolute poverty. If you don't have 10,000 bullets with which to defend yourself and go on offensive actions, we are still joking. The plan I have will make sure that all relevant nationalist forces will have enough bullets for resistance. And then the key core forces in the strategic areas that we think are relevant will have hundreds of thousands of bullets, men, and rifles. While we are using the resistance forces to undermine the ability of the enemy to move, to fight, to coerce, we're using the core forces to clear them out from the hideouts. This strategy keeps you alive. That's the first thing. It gives you back your sanity. It eliminates uncertainty about logistics, rifles, bullets. It gives you more power. It doesn't reduce your power. The power we have is our ability to influence the population. It's our ability to be loved by the population, to be seen by heroes as heroes by the population that we want to free. That is the power we have. The power is not in your rifles, it's not in your position, it's not in anything. That time when you are sick, you are taken care of, you have at least allowances, you have some sense of international support, you get the population to be again, once again, your primary base of defense. This plan is the most feasible. We can achieve this in the next 6 months. If all of you adopt the liberation tax, use this method to mobilize and store money for us to move to the level of action. If you people follow my lead, if you people follow the prescription I am putting in place, we can all be together in 1 year. We can go find where the other generals are buried, bring them into the cemetery and bury them in the cemetery of heroes, honor them, let our population begin to live their lives like dignified people. If we continue on this part of utopia, of hope, of blame games, we'll be on the same spot in the next 10 years. And by then, most of you must have still fallen. So I ask each and every one of you to listen to this audio carefully, with an open mind. I know that this is the plan I'm pursuing. If you want us to work together, reach out to me. We will work out the modalities. We will make sure that we show our people that tangible collaboration has been achieved. At the right time, all those people seeking collaboration for purposes of relevance, they will have their space at the political realm. But we cannot allow relevance to inject itself in a brutal and murderous struggle against an enemy that takes no prisoners.